Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the slight delay. Like everyone's just jumping in here, so give us 1 second.
Sorry about that, Martin.
Okay, thanks. This guy was going to log in and be like, okay, let me log in and open it up.
I was having a hard time for some reason.
It's okay.
The state system doesn't always love Zoom.
It does not like Zoom.
Okay, just as all these people are entering in here, I'll just make sure we've got everyone set here. So, okay. I know we've got some additional people that have all signed up joining, so they may be joining in in a few minutes, but we're gonna get started here because we do have
Excuse me, Martin.
yes.
Could someone there, is someone able to forward the link to Ben Freund? He just texted me and asked for that, but you guys can probably do that
We
quicker than I
can't
can.
send, there isn't a link to send because you have to register. He did register and received an email with the link. So I'm not sure I can.
Oh, it's unique to each email address?
No, but it's no, it's not that it's unique to each email. I don't. So let me just I can forward what I just got in.
I'm gonna send him, Martin. I'll send it over to him.
You got it? Okay, I
Yeah.
just got it too. I can forward it. You got it? Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, when they get the email, it has the link in it to join. And he just registered, he just did another registration because it just came through,
Okay.
even though he had registered prior. We'll get it set. Yeah, because I know a couple people just sent an additional registration in because they probably couldn't find the link. So I just had a couple come through that had already registered in there, doing a second registration because they probably didn't catch the link. Okay, well, while we're going to get started here, just as a reminder, as we are on Zoom here for the full meeting, that if we, just courtesy to please keep yourself muted unless you're speaking. When you are speaking, we do ask that you put your camera on so we can see your lovely faces today. For that, at the bottom of the screen, there is a react button, a little heart shape that says react. You'll see there's a raised hand feature. So use that. It does keep me updated on my participant list of the order that the hands are raised. So we will go, through that way as we've got the raised hand feature there. So that way everyone has their opportunity to speak and be able to do that appropriately. So thank you. So with that, we will, excuse me, call our PA 490 working group meeting to order at 9:07 a.m. I'm not going to go through an attendance of everyone here because if you click on the participant link at the bottom of the screen, You'll see there's a listing of all of us named there, as well as any public members that are there. So that is all in there. So we'll spare that of going around the room and identifying everybody that's here. To just start out then, sorry, let me just get my notes up. There we go. I do want to just, again, welcome everybody. Today's agenda is to set the finalization of the approved recommendations, public presentation. A final vote record of the approved recommendations is in the packet, and I'll call that up when we get to that point. Additionally, in the packet is some information that Joe had sent in, and we'll get to that as well. And then I know we'll also share, Paul sent something this morning, which we'll call up and put on the screen as well when we get to that point as part of the discussion on here. But that's kind of our agenda today. We do have to finish by 11:30 today. And we do have at least one member of the public that has requested to speak, so we have to allot that time at the end, just so you know kind of the schedule here. Commissioner?
Thank you, Undersecretary. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Apologies for some of the IT challenges, but I'm glad we all figured it out. Just want to remind everybody what Martin said about the React button on the bottom, and raise your hand so we can make sure we queue people up in an orderly fashion. Happy to see that we received two documents between the meetings with some work for people to respond to. Thank you to the members who took the time out to do that, in addition to the time that they're dedicating to the formal meetings. But with that, why don't we get started? I don't know if we want to go to Joe's presentation first or his.
Yeah, give me 1 second, because I've got one other thing to just show up here, as long as I can get it right here. You should all be able to see this is the final recommendations that were voted on through our last meeting. It is in the packet, as well as, the full listing, everything, and the background, documents, everything else. But it is in your packet, where we do have the vote, which I just want to just briefly just run over what all the votes were on here. And under the land, was voted to establish land use classes, sea, land, waterfront, maritime, farm, woodland, forest, pasture, annual crops, non-productive, and orchard. It was voted to remove the river valley. On the reporting, it was voted to recommend that part of the PA 490 process, there be an annual reporting of survey information from farmland and maritime landowners. Under the valuation, voted to recommend maintaining forest land valuations as existing practice. Regarding current practice, we said, look at some of the approved recommendations there, and we can have further discussion on that, as we stated. But some of those items we took action on fall into, maintaining the current practice by those enhancements. And then it was also voted to recommend using rental values to set the land rates. So those were the pieces that were actually all voted on as our final action, narrowed down from the full list, just so everyone has that in a simple form there. And then, whoops, give me 1 second. Saved all these in a separate thing so I can call them up easy, and it's just... and then, as I mentioned, Joe put a kind of a packet together here of just some pieces on land classification descriptions, survey development related to land rental rates. Joe, I don't know if you want to go over. I can do a shared screen of that as well, if there's any highlights you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to go through it quick if that's helpful. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is just some thoughts on reflecting on the last meeting, and Martin, go to the next screen, because it was just a title slide. So
Okay.
a couple of points here. The second half of this, I'll talk about some survey development stuff that I think was missed, which is just worth considering in this next process. And then I was concerned after the last meeting that some of these categories we have may not have rental values. And so we selected category titles. I took a shot at defining some of these categories, And then while doing that, I was thinking some of these may not have adequate rental values. So I think it'd be worth talking about. These are the current ones. So Martin, you can go to the next slide. I put those in as reference based on the descriptions of them. So I pulled a lot of these. Oh, it's all right. Trigger figure there. So I pulled a lot of those descriptions and I modified some of them slightly. Some of them I put in almost exactly to the current, to what we voted on for topics. Because we voted on topics, but we didn't define what those topics were precisely. So, and I apologize for the seabed. That should be sea land, but I think you all know what I mean on that. So the descriptions here was an effort to give us something to work off of. Certainly, I'm not, offended if somebody doesn't like these or wants to suggest something different. But I thought these could work well. Annual crops is a big one. It covers a lot of different stuff. Orchard seems pretty clear, similar to what it was. So does pasture and hayland. The farmstead or farm, I'm getting the name wrong on that one, but these areas on the farm to support buildings, that was one that I thought we may not actually have rental values for that if we conduct a survey. Farm woodland was one that again, we probably won't have rental values of. People probably aren't renting farm woodland. That one's kind of easy in my mind. I would think we would just use the same value as forest land, which has been done in the past and seems to be logical. Non-productive, the swamp, the ledge, all of that I cannot imagine we're going to have rental values from. So we got to think about how we're going to do that outside of rental values. Maritime heritage land, I don't want to, I took a stab at this, but maritime heritage land is similar to what it was in the past. Again, we may not have rental values on that. And, but I really have no idea. And then sea land, these underwater areas, I have some questions on those that I'd be interested in hearing people who know more about that. And then open space, we didn't have a category for open space. We didn't vote on that, but I think we need to. It's by statute. I'm not sure it's complicated. We probably won't have rental values on that either. And I think by statute, open space has some rules. Martin, you want to go to the next one?
Sure. Just one note on the open space. That is not defined by PA 490 valuation. That's why we don't have a definition. It is taken out of the PA 490 process. It's done by the local municipality.
Okay, that's great. So then we can leave that one out.
Yeah. And just one other thought, just on the maritime stuff. Those, we do have we do have lease information on the maritime, and that's the way those are done now. And the forestry is done by the stumpage. So we do have other methodologies for those pieces there.
Yeah, and if you go to my next slide, I have that at the bottom point, and I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't make it maybe clear enough in that sentence, but yeah, forest land and open.
Oh, you froze up, Joe. One second. Let's see if we can get Joe back here, and then I see your hand up, Kim. 1 second. Okay. We may have to wait for him to come back. Kim, do you want to go ask your question? We have to repeat it when Joe gets back on.
Yeah, no problem. One thing that I've been talking to some fellow farmers about is, and this kind of goes back to something that was said in the last meeting about consolidating everything into cropland, all the tillables into cropland. What that does is it takes your highest categories, tillable A and tillable D, and it kind of crushes everything. And what I think that we have overlooked here, if we're basing everything on use, is a landscape ornamental tobacco use category, separate from cropland. Those are very different categories, and I think it's important if we're going to be creating categories that are based on use to have that additional category inserted into this.
Thanks, Kim. I don't see Joe pop back on here yet. He may have logged out to run down through here. So let's just see. Bonnie?
Great, thanks, Martin. I think one of the things that when we look at how when we discuss going to a annual cropland is because farmers will grab whatever land they can get. So while it used to be historical that tobacco was always on the very best land in the state, it's not the truth anymore. They will take land wherever they can get it. So while I appreciate that there's a lot of historical background in who got the best land to plant some of the high value crops. That's just not the reality anymore. Everybody grabs land wherever they can grab it to plant whatever they need to plant. So I think that's why we ended up on having one, basic, annual crop category.
Thank you, Bonnie. Yes. Okay. Not seeing Joe back on here. We may have to come back to it. Let me just look through. I know, he says points to consider regarding any survey of land rental values. Again, I think as was just kind of mentioned, the different categories there, perhaps, smaller group size, finding out if there is, part of the second part, we already discussed forest land, open space, that we don't need to kind of pull those out separately. Just on the survey, should the questionnaire use only asked about rental values by categories or other information worth asking? I know one of the things we talked about the last meeting was looking at, as the base is looking at the existing survey on here, and then, using that and then looking about what other types of things, we are looking for. And as Bonnie just mentioned, tobacco, here's, corn or tobacco growers, which, the types of crops and everything else.
Hey, Martin, excuse me.
Yeah.
Just Joe just got back
Oh.
in, so I wanted to.
Oh, great.
I know you're reading off another screen and probably didn't see him at the bottom of the list there.
Yes, sorry.
All right, sorry about that. My Zoom just disappeared and then
That's okay.
it was out. It didn't like what I was saying. Anyway, so I don't know. I don't want to take everybody a step back.
What we did was we covered the last piece on here because we already discussed the forest space and open space, forest land and open space.
Right.
And then, Kim and Bonnie just made some, comments that we had discussed at previous meetings regarding, the various, categories of lumping them all together, in larger groups and, some of the crop
Yeah.
types and everything. So that's where
Cool.
just looking at slide 5 here.
Okay. Yeah, so there were those 4 categories that I think are going to be hard to find rental values on. And then this, thinking about these rental values, some of these points we've already made, 0 values included in the medians. I put these down, maybe using means versus medians, results of the survey being reported publicly. It would be cool if these were reported by county. And then, some of these other information, like what about inverse rents, where a farmer may be being paid by the landowner to keep their property in agriculture for tax benefits. Those types of things might exist or might exist more into the future as well. So those are the points on that slide. And then underwater land classification. I don't want to spend time on this slide, but I would be really interested to hear more about this. I know we chatted about it at a previous meeting, but from what I can tell, most of what these folks are using is leased to the farmer by the state, which seems odd that they're paying property tax on it. Maybe so we can skip through that slide, but maybe we can hear more at some point on that. And if we want to talk about these as we go through, we can. I don't want to take the whole stage, so I figured I'd get through this and then.
Yeah, if you want to just continue, zap through this and then we can, go on to, other thoughts people have as we try to,
Yeah.
where we're at.
So I was looking up the National Agricultural Statistics Service data, and most everybody on here has probably filled out the Census of Agriculture from them, which is a census of every farm in the country. And one thing that was interesting, they don't have rental values for Connecticut. They have land rental values for most other states, but not Connecticut because there's a lack of data. Now, not everybody reports to NASS, as we know, and not everybody reports to the state when we do a survey either. So But these were interesting in terms of some of the data that's available and some of the commodity categories. So if we're thinking about like this annual crops category being too huge, well, there may be some stuff we could dovetail with the National Agricultural Statistics Service related to land rental values and just how they value things. So I wanted to highlight that, and you can go to the next slide. So they do this by county, which is one of the reasons I think it would be interesting for us to know stuff by county. Um, this is a summary of Tallinn County. You can see number of farms, acres of the farm, market values of products sold. They don't have rental values on here because there's not enough rentals. But what you can see is somehow the land use practices, the current use, if you will, the types of farms being used and the amounts of each. So I just pulled Tallinn County because you can see it sort of in the central part of the screen, just under two down from 11, you can see land and farms by use by acres. And this is Tallinn County as an example. You can see 15,785 acres of cropland, 2,700 or so acres of pasture land, 11,800 acres of farm woodland. So that's only woodland on farms, and then these other. So that's kind of interesting data, and we could access some of these data if we needed to. So we can skip through that, but those are available. And then these are some notes. Just I had done some social science in my PhD work. Go up one slide, Martin.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. So I highlighted some things that I think would be really important in this survey process. Some of these are simple, like don't ask useless questions. Keep things concise. Select questions that can be completed with existing information and data. Some of that I think is challenging. Keep time required to complete to a minimum. So go to the next slide. There's some stuff that I think was missing from the last survey process that would be good to highlight. So pre-testing. So these surveys should be pre-tested on groups before implementing the survey. And I think that was one of the challenges that happened in this last round is this survey was sent out, but the potential errors in it weren't highlighted prior to it being finalized. Things like watching for confusion, unanswered questions, people who start the survey but then cannot continue because they rent for $0 type of thing. Reminders, I know some of that happened. And then this dynamic of non-response bias. So there should be some assessment in this of who didn't respond. Are we not getting any response from I don't know, beef farmers? Are they just not responding? Or people with hay and pasture land? Are they just, do we have some disproportionate amount? Or are all of the late respondents, so the people who respond after like 3 reminders, are all of them vegetable farmers? Because the survey hypothetically is done in June or something like that. And so do we have some bias where we're not capturing people? That should be something that's assessed as part of this process. You can go to the next slide. So there's some citations, but that's it. So I want to stop there because there's a lot in there. I'm happy to chat more about it. I'm happy to, have some of it ignored if people want, but I thought it was good structure.
No, appreciate that, Joe, and putting the work into it. And I know it got shared out to everybody, so everyone, at least had a chance to look at it prior as well. Any other discussion or comments on that? Anyone wants to? Michael, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Can I just make comment on the seabed stuff?
Sure.
So it would typically be called submerged lands or submerged shellfish grounds or submerged grounds. Usually it's something along those lines. So submerged lands is usually the most commonly used phrase. And also, so there are a bunch of there's only really all the leases and all of that is brought up. That's not going to fall under PA 490. The only thing that would are franchises, which are private. They're privately owned franchises, and it's kind of spotty where they are, and most of them are some of them are worked, some of them are not worked, some of them are just on maps nobody even knows what's on the bottom. But the leases and the state franchises and all those are not, as far as I know, eligible to be under 490. So it's really maritime heritage land, and those private franchises that have been owned for however many hundreds, 110 years or so. And that would really be it. So a lot of the leases that we're talking about are not eligible for the program, as far as I know.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Just one quick thing. Keith, can you just mute your microphone on that? Thanks. And then I think Damon was up and then Joe.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, just to further that conversation briefly, the underlying issue with the 490 and the underwater farmland or seabed or whatever it's called, submerged land. The process of 490 requires application by the owner of the property. They would really have to change that language to see, or the leaseholder can make that application. I've said this a dozen times that I think that whole process of putting it in a 490 is flawed, in that there's never going to be a change of use. There's never going to be a real change of ownership. There's never going to be any of those things that you would want to preserve the property from becoming. But it is in the listing. So until legislatively that gets corrected, that's one of the reasons why assessors will be looking for some type of valuation for that property. Currently, the property is assessed under 1264. Shellfish beds are assessed and taxed, but they're sent to the leaseholder, not necessarily the leaseor, the lessee, the one who's in control and actually farms the land. So there is some form of assessment on those properties now. Again, we've gone through, I've looked through the state. There's varying rates that people use. Some use it based on an actual tillable land, 490 or something along those lines. It's very difficult to come up with a valuation on it. But that's kind of one of the flaws within that I think is beyond the pale of getting an income information or refining the process of valuing the land. It should be valued. I would presume that it could be valued based on the rate that they pay in the form of a lease to the state of Connecticut. There's long-term leases, there's permanent leases, there's, again, income information that can be derived. And that's another thing that Joe brought up, is that some of these categories that are in there really can't be defined by an income stream. I recognize that the recommendation was that it be used, but I mean, it really should probably be recommended that be the first choice or something like that when income streams are available, because obviously you're going to have to look at all forms of information in order to value it properly. Thank you.
Joe and then Keith.
At the risk of making a dangerous motion, somebody, it could be me, should motion that we change that name of that category to submerged land, if that's what's commonly used. If there's more discussion on that, fine. But if submerged land is what's commonly used instead of sea land, we should just change the name of that. And then I was wondering about rental values as well. Damon kind of covered it, so I'll stop. If rental values aren't available, are lease rate values appropriate? That's a question I have.
Thanks. Keith and then Kim.
Thank you, Martin. Joe's done a great job of putting this together and pulling stuff, so thank you very much, Joe. I do recognize that you're right that some of those categories won't have a very high survey response rate back, and that somewhere in the process, some sort of extrapolation may be required to align the values as you start out with, waste and swampland, to have some base and then sort of climb based upon historical productivity of the land, as opposed to then rental rates potentially being out of whack from one category to the other, depending upon what the survey information is coming back. I also think it's important to note that we really are talking about the capitalization of those rental values as far as where it comes through, and whether there's a part of the process later on in our agenda as far as the impact of that and the decision making that Farm Credit put into the report that they did and presented one of the first meetings of how the numbers get applied and where it gets cranked out to the actual values. As far as to the county consolidation, I agree that consolidation is going to be required because some towns have virtually not much, and then we don't want to be picking out on individual farms or operations. Many things are going to the COG model now rather than counties. Sure you all know that in the 50s and Connecticut counties were disbanded as a legislative arrangement, but COGs now are how a number of things are done. So that may be the consolidation piece as far as reporting back out. And as on the consolidation of cropland, Kim had mentioned, as we combine cropland categories and you've got, A, B, and C, is that now all into, one group, or is it how that's handled? I think the impact back to most farmers is going to be relatively low. There will be some shakeout, but again, I go back to, I think we're on a pretty advantageous situation as far as farmers on what that tax rate per acre is compared to total grand list and the assessment. So, a change in $1,000 per acre is $25 to $30 worth of tax in a given town. And so I don't want to focus too much on saying, we're hurting somebody, at the low end versus high end. So I think a lot of this will shake out. And that's my comments for now.
Thanks, Keith. Damon, can you just mute yourself, and then Kim?
Yeah, hi. I'm just a little concerned that we're, here we are, meeting 8, right? I think we're in meeting 8, and we really have not taken a deep dive into talking about what the data points are. We're still talking about just lease values as the only measure of how we're going to assess the use of land. I think a lot has changed in 60 years since that was sort of determined as the measure for this. And so are we at some point going to discuss any further data points that we're going to be collecting in this survey? And then the other question I have is, how long are we holding the 2020 rates? It seems like, to be fair, we need to, in order to assess property values or use values based on these different categories that we're discussing, whether there's an additional category added to cover landscape ornamental sod, if you will, that we're going to need time to collect that data. If the last survey really collected it from such a small group, I think it's important to give farmers and PA 490 landholders the time to comply with filling out this survey. And it seems also that there needs to be time to build an actual database that ultimately serves us from that point into the future, that we can run queries and find that information without having to do a laborious long survey every year, so that we can hopefully simplify that, and kind of like the easy form. And when you're filing your taxes, hopefully we do one big survey, and then each year thereafter we do kind of a smaller easy form, but that we're collecting data beyond lease rates, because I think that's the only way that we can really make an assessment on what farmers can afford, what foresters can afford, what people are managing forest land and maritime and all of these things can actually afford, who are producing a crop or producing a product from that land.
Okay, a couple things on that. The survey requires legislative change. So that would have to, if any proposal recommendations has to go, we'd have to propose it to the state legislature, which doesn't start till January of next year. It would have to get approved through the legislative process. Typically, it's either adopted as of a July 1st date or an October 1st assessment, date or October 1st date. So that's, if we implement a survey, through legislation, it can't start until those effective dates. So you're already looking at, 2027 before anything's going to happen with a survey should it get passed by the General Assembly. So that's one piece on the survey for that. So that's just
to add additional data points to the survey, we have to get legislative approval.
No, the annual survey that's been recommended by this group requires legislative action. That has to go through the legislature. That's a legislative action item because it's not a currently report that's required or mandated at this point. That's not just the survey, the 5-year survey we're doing. That's something different. The recommendation by this group is to do an annual survey, which requires legislative action to make it mandatory that everyone that's a PA 490 landowner, has to file this annual form to keep their PA 490 up. That was what the motion was. So that requires legislative action.
I understand, but my point is, what are those data points we're collecting on that survey?
That hasn't
5 years or every year, whatever the case may be. We are doing a survey. So what are those points we're collecting? Is there any thoughts from the group on that, and can we discuss those data points?
Yeah, if that wants to be part of the overall recommendation, but it's going to require legislative, action, further down the road for the annual survey. Typically, whether or not the group wants to make those recommendations and go into the deep dive of it, or just do general recommendations and that be part of, a subgroup, of what those, data points in the survey is going to be. I mean, that's up to the group, for how they'd like to, move forward with this. Bonnie?
Kim, I think what I'm hearing you ask is, other than what rental rates and lease rates are, will there be other information that landowners will have to turn in when they go in or when they sign up for PA 490, which again, we have recommended it be an annual collection of numbers, not just a survey. So what do you think should be added to the landowner's information that he or she has to turn in?
Well, I think it's worth discussing and maybe putting some ideas out there, but certainly, I think given some of the, let's talk about what are the challenges, right, that farmers are facing. We have 2 big farms or big, medium-sized farms that are going out of business this year, right, because of the costs of farming. And so I do think it's important to look at those costs because they have dramatically changed since the 1960s. There's energy, there's labor, there's input costs, of course, taxes. These are all compounding data points, and knowing what those data points are gives us an opportunity to say, well, this is what farmers are facing. Can they really afford still $3,000 an acre, for cropland?
So just one thing, so as I know we've got Ben and Damon, then Jenny. So we have to remember that our goal here is land valuation, not the taxes, but land valuation. That is what PA 490 is. The taxes is an outcome of it and everything else, but that our purpose and our charge is on land valuation. Ben, then Damon, then Jenny.
To that point, I think the survey should be fairly narrow, needs to be narrowly focused on gaining or gleaning the land rental values, and our job is done. That all this other things to save agriculture, I fully endorse, I fully believe in, but I think 490 does its job. We need to collect this data, and I think to my opinion, we're at the finish line. We've already recommended that we're going to use land rental values for the valuation, and we're going to survey to get those on an annual basis. If we recommend those, if it has to work through the legislature, that's fine. But our task as a committee is to basically send that forward and hopefully get it adopted at that later date.
Thanks, Ben. Damon, then Jenny, then Kim.
Just want to comment on Kimberly's suggestion about taking all that other stuff into consideration. Really, what you're talking about in that example is taking an expense off of the net income stream. In that case, really what you're talking about is a income approach, looking at what the farmer earns in income versus what their expenses are to calculate and capitalize on that income. That's been shot down. Rental income is basically going to be Mr. and Mrs. Smith, private landowner, has a couple of extra acres and they're renting it for what? And that's going to be the primary basis. You're not really going to find through the rental approach any consideration of the farmer's expense, because the landowner doesn't necessarily bear those expenses. They just want to have the, $100 an acre or whatever the case is, or $10 as the case may be. Thank you.
Welcome. Jenny, then Kim.
Just wanted to remind the group that PA 490 is a land use, not a land income law. And so not all landowners are farmers. And so a couple points that who we are actually surveying, right? And so Ben, I hear what you're saying, that you think we're at the finish line, but we really need to talk about the failure, which was the survey. And so I hear what I want, I want this to move forward. I want the recommendations to be made. But I like what Joe tried to do in his document to say what were some of the failure points and how can we, he did it in a positive way. He didn't talk about the failures. He showed good methodology in terms of how we can survey people. Regardless of legislative change, we have to look at the survey and what gets asked of it. So I just want to make a couple points. I think that all zeros must be counted. That is a value. And however they put it in their mathematical equation, fine. Median, mean, whatever. How do we help landowners? If it's going to the landowner, how do we get it to the farmer? And if it's going to the farmer, as I understand in the former survey, if they had over a certain number, and I don't know what that was, I thought it was only like 5, but we have some farmers who lease land from 20 different sources. So how are we going to make sure that if the survey is going to the farmer, that the farmer actually has the proper opportunity to allocate all of their land rental situations, right? And that there's not a cap. Or that the farmer would have an opportunity to go back in. I don't know because I didn't get it. I didn't see it. So I don't know exactly how that all flushed out. I think that's all I want to say is we just have to, I think we just have to, and Martin, and I'm really nervous about making a motion here, right? Because I would love to be able to just list what our goals are for the survey. As discussion points, because to make a motion is just really difficult when we want to be able to have discourse and dialogue and not have to keep revising something. So I guess what I'm asking is there another option while we are could we make a motion to discuss the elements of a survey and then within that build it? And that's, we can close that motion and then vote on what we did. I'm just asking if there's another option to kind of allow better, more fluid discourse so that we can create something meaningful, quickly, and coherent and move on.
Well, typically not under Robert's rules. That's not the way it works, on it, for it. Technically, we're having discussion now, on it, and because no one's made any motions at this point to do anything. So it's kind of started as discussion on the presentation that was made, here. To make a motion to discuss, yeah, you can, but it's just going to be, there's nothing to vote on. you're voting to discuss, but there's nothing to vote on,
and I
on that
I
piece. So
totally
that's the
understand
hard
Robert's
part of
rule.
that piece. I mean, as you said, we've had a couple people that have done presentations on the side, brought them to the meeting. They're brought up. Some have motions made after them, everything else. I mean, that, could be the way that it could happen there, on it, I think Bonnie just put in here, kind of a subcommittee, to look at the survey and everything else. I mean, and some of this, as I noted, and up to this group, the recommendations can be made, without going into the deeper dive. And then afterwards, when this, that can be developed as part of the legislative process and everything else moving forward by a smaller group outside of this, to say, okay, now we're going to have a smaller group do this, to come up with, these. Remember, these are all recommendations. So we've got to go up through the chain then afterwards, on this. I will note, our legislative proposals, for anything have to be in by October 1st. So we do have, we only have, that's our timeline to get any legislative proposals in for this year on here. So that's just, a timeline thing. And I apologize because I meant to mention that at the beginning of the meeting for that. So, there could be a couple of options, to look at there. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Martin, I just want to say,
Yeah.
we went through Joe's presentation, and thank you for that, Joe. I don't know if there's any further conversation on Joe's presentation. We received a presentation from Paul this morning. Out of respect for the work that went into that, I think we should move through that. But to Jenny, your point, I think there needs to be a motion on the table, even to discuss, the broad components of a survey, and start narrowing in to action items that members would take. We need recommendations that the committee has voted on to accept and move forward. And given that the discussion has been pretty wide ranging, I don't know that there has been a fine point put on some of these topics. So I would suggest that people put a motion on. People can deliberate, amend, and the amendment can be 180 degrees from the original motion. That's not, that's not unallowed. But we've got to start getting something on the table for everybody to respond to and get a formal vote taken to either accept or decline the principles of the underlying motion. So I don't know if we want to move to Paul's presentation, given that we're kind of off of Joe's presentation, but I do want to respect the fact that another group did do some work between meetings to present and ask for the opportunity to present.
Yeah. So let me just quickly, because I know we had a couple people waiting to say something. If there's something on Joe's presentation that you want to mention here, before we go through. So Damon, John, Kim, Damon.
Thank you. I just wanted to try to clarify because it sounded like what we were doing is asking the farmer to tell us what he is renting the property for. And I was under the impression that is not what's happening, that we are looking for the property owners to provide us that information. That's why the list of ownerships and addresses would be coming from the town. Those are the people who have the land classified. Very often the farmers don't pay rent for their own land. So they really wouldn't be the source of that information. Thank you.
Yeah. Kim, and then John. Sorry if I went out of order trying to.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out like where, it's not easy to find a clear, concrete where our charge is this and it can't take into account this. I mean, on one hand, Martin, you said, we're focused on the lease because that's what, has been done and that we can't take into account costs, margins, all of these things. Yet in Joe's report, he specifically lists those items, right? Value of production in dollars for hay. The reality is the use is exactly that. And so what data points are again, and leasing may not to come into account in some instances. And so we're unfairly, pricing all these new categories because there are new categories that we're creating. We're consolidating categories. So what is ground zero in figuring out what now cropland that now was what used to be broken into 4 different categories is now 1 category. How do we figure out the value of that? And because it sort of just over the last 10 years has gone incrementally, in most cases, incrementally higher. And so is that still the case, that we just keep taking it incrementally higher when we're seeing farms closing? And so our charge is to not just isolate PA 490 from the actual use of farming. So I think that it's worth making a motion to discuss those data points in depth after Paul's presentation, or begin to speak to that, because I don't think that lease value is a clear indicator based on what Joe just simply presented.
Thanks. John, and then Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Just a point of clarification, just for my understanding, while we're talking about reclassifying some of these categories, and this is more for Damon. If this is approved, or reclassifying the names and everything, a lot of the responsibility is going to be on the local assessor to rechange the tillable A through D and all the other categories into the new format. All property cards need to be updated, and assessments. How does that process work in the real world once this changes? Will the assessor have to go through training on these new categories? And what if they don't comply within a certain amount of time?
If I may respond. The way that I would view this to take place would be that during the next revaluation cycle, once they are in the process of updating everybody's values, it is at that time that they would implement whatever revisions are permanent at that point. So that if it's all under a tillable, or not a tillable, but a product land or a growth land, whatever the categories are, they would then at that point in time consolidate all their tillable A, B, C, D, and then under the revaluation, the property assessment would change in conjunction with that. Otherwise, there's no reason to do a interim revaluation and change your structure. In fact, you really shouldn't, because it should be relative to the last cycle. So whatever values you had as of 2022 is what should be carried all the way forward to 2027, period. No other revisions or new categories should be applied in between.
Okay, thanks, Damon.
Thanks. Paul? No, you're muted,
here.
Paul.
Yep. Okay. So I worked with a few others and put together some members of the committee, as well as members not on the committee, just to get some other perspective. And we've got, we have a proposal that I'd be happy to screen share if that's a function that's possible here.
Yeah, I've got it right. I have it up. Let me share it for you, Paul.
Okay.
You should be able to see it now.
Yep, I can see it there. Hope everybody else can. So this motion, I'd like to make a motion, and it would include restating some of the prior conclusions and votes that this group has already taken, along with hopefully a way to move this forward. I move that the PA 490 working group reaffirm endorsing the capitalization of rental values as the sole basis for setting land assessment rates for land enrolled in the PA 490 program, and listed the land classifications that we've already discussed and agreed on, although we have to change that to submerged land for number 8, I guess. The working group adopted the recommendation to have the assessors annually collect survey information as a requirement of continued enrollment in the PA 490 assessment. The survey should incorporate Joe's suggestions and be built by a third party under the supervision of the DOAG commissioner and with his final approval. The next page just lists those categories and elaborates on the characteristics, the description of them, but that's nothing new that we can kind of just jump over that, really. I think most of us are familiar with that at this point. And then this last page just identified some of the highlights of where we're going and what this motion would achieve, hopefully. Reaffirm rental values for land rate determination, assessment increase cap. This group has talked about that. I'm just putting this in there to say that that would be as a proposal to be governed by the DOAG commissioner through a mandated review of land values that are triggered with we need to set a value here. I didn't want to be bold enough to just say it should be 8% or 10% or whatever. But if if land values increase based on the survey above a certain threshold from the previous 5-year value, then this motion would direct the commissioner to just review that and make sure that is realistic and accurate, or there's some anomaly in the survey results that created that. And that would be done before those those new values are published. Further, to redefine and consolidate the land use classifications that we've just seen on this earlier page. The survey framework would hopefully, if we do it right, and whether this group has how much involvement there is by this group in the actual wording of that survey, I don't know. I think that's going to be a tedious process myself, and I think that there are folks that are more skilled at that than I am. But that hopefully that will provide high-level direction, the results of that survey, to OPM and DOAG, that through the engagement of these third-party experts to design a streamlined, user-friendly survey, again, incorporating some of the suggestions that Joe had in his document there, that survey, as I said before, would require approval from the commissioner, that it would utilizing this system would leverage the assessor's contact list for distribution and annual data collection. I mean, landowners in the program would be required to submit that survey with that information in order to be able to continue to reap the benefits of the lower assessment value that 490 gives them, and ensure the stakeholder trust particularly in the agricultural community, through some kind of advisory review and support from farming groups in the state. The next steps that I foresee in this as we go forward would be to finalize these recommendations, perhaps even as soon as this meeting. I know some of us feel ready for that, but as Martin has emphasized, in order to get something going for the 2027 session, we do need to have some expediency on this process. And then we still have to do the public presentation aspect to get input from the public and committee members. And then finally, to meet that deadline for the Department of Agriculture to get it in to the hopper, if you will. As to answer kind of respond really to Kim's question before is, regarding like how long are these 2020 values?
Paul, before you do that, because you made a motion, I need a second.
Oh, yep. Thank you. Sorry.
It's okay. I just don't want to get any discussion there. You went through that. Thank you. Is there a second on the motion?
Second.
Thank you,
Second.
John. Okay, we got a second from John. Thank you. Okay, Paul, now go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be real brief. This is just I want an opportunity just to respond. My understanding from the governor, that we're going to be working under the 2020 land values until a new system is in place. And his own words right out of his mouth were, whether that takes 2 years or 4 years, we want to do it right. Those were his words. And so until we get this done, realistically, if we can get legislation to approve the annual survey in 2027, then we're looking at implementing that and getting the assessors all up to speed and everything. It would be 2028 before any land values and new assessment rates are determined, most likely. So just to answer your question, Kim, from earlier, we'd be looking at realistically 2028 or 9 before new rates are actually enforced. But anyway, open to other discussion now.
Okay, so we have, and I called back up just the main motion up to the top of the screen again there, with that, just so everybody has it. So want to do discussion on the motion. Kim?
Yes.
I know you have your hand raised, so.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. I think I just didn't lower it.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's okay. Thank you. Joe and then Damon?
Thanks. Yeah, and Paul, thanks for putting this together. I'm glad to see it. It'd be great if we could copy and paste some of this in the chat. A couple of things on my end. I would like to see a little more clear how what the definitions are for the categories. I think that's worth chatting about. I have some as well. I don't know if yours line up with mine. I don't imagine they're much different. But I think that would be worth discussing once we can look at them. I'll put the ones that I suggested in the chat. One friendly amendment I would like to see to this is that we use the term submerged land. I think that's a better term, it sounds like. The other real problem I see with this motion is that it says we only use rental values to determine the value, and for specifically farm woodland, non-productive lands, maritime heritage, and sea land, we probably will not have any or an adequate sample size to determine of rental values for those lands. So if we say we can only use rental values, then we could run into the same type of problem we ran into this year with swamp. So Damon had mentioned earlier about having an alternative method for valuation when the sample size is for rental values isn't large enough. And I would be interested in hearing more about that. I have some thoughts on some of that. Some of that could be zero, but I think that I wouldn't vote yes on this motion at this point because I don't think those categories I listed would be good for rental values. And I'll put the descriptions I had in the chat. I'm having trouble pasting them.
Hey, Joe, I did put the text in the chat, and I did a screen grab of the table. So
oh, thanks. Yeah, I just changed some of the names of them, but yeah, thanks.
Okay, great. Damon?
Thank you, Martin. Joe's basically said a lot of what I was just going to say, is that, again, we all have already discussed and concluded that there are categories here which are non-income producing, let alone rental. So it doesn't make sense to fully commit to a single approach to value when we know that it's going to fail. There are three general approaches to determining a market value, including sales and income. So I don't think that you should exclude any approach in determining an in-use value. We're not talking market value, but you can still derive an in-use value by sales by looking at those properties that have deed restrictions on them and sold to another farmer, or to others' use that should be available to you, and it could help. Obviously, each one of these categories is going to have a value of some type. And we want to try to aid the process in determining those values and not restrict that process in any way. As far as categories, excuse me, that should be questioned, I mean, I would think that you should be able to gather basic income such as what the property is leased for, what is the use of that property, and that's about it. Whatever land type perhaps you might be able to identify, soil type, something along those lines, but kind of a breakout of what the acreages are and what those acreages are being used for. That will help you determine the in-use value. You can categorize it out based on those classes Again, so if you can get multiple reports of different crops or different productions, you can throw those into those individual categories. If you wanted to, you could isolate those individual categories and say, check here. Is this used for annual crops? Is this used for orchard? Whatever the case may be. So, you definitely are going to need some type of acreage, use, and income requirement in the questionnaire. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments, discussion? Jenny, then Joe?
I'm just going to say it. I know we already talked that open space category is not part of PA 490, but when Paul made his presentation, his motion, he didn't remove it from the language. So I just, for official purposes.
Thanks, Jenny. Joe, did you have something else?
Yeah, just quick. I'm happy with looks like a lot of the definitions are really aligned with the ones that I was thinking too. So I'm happy with the definitions of those categories. I would ask for one friendly amendment that we include in this motion to get aquaculture out of the category that's maritime. And then Michael, if you're okay with this, change that seabed to submerged land name. But I'll turn it to Michael on that. I still think we should figure out what to do with these categories, and maybe it's a separate motion that are not going to have a big enough sample size in terms of people reporting rents. That's pretty serious.
Okay. Michael, then Paul?
Yes to the change to submerged lands. Yes, you are correct. I think rental rates for both maritime heritage lands and submerged lands are going to be a very difficult number to get every single year. And one other thing in the classifications for submerged land on both presentations, kelp is included. And kelp is grown in the water column, and that is not something that is going to fall under these jurisdictions. So it's only going to be shellfish and things that are on the bottom. So that should probably be removed from the category classifications as well.
Great. Paul and then Kim?
I appreciate everybody's feedback and comments on here. And yes, there are some work to be done on this motion. I think that given the time frame that I elaborated on a little bit earlier, is that we do have time. While we do have to get a proposal to out of this working group so that the Department of Agriculture has something to work with and submit to for the next legislative session, the actual wording and fine tuning, how these values are attained, and what the survey looks like, providing some guidance, and that perhaps if we did have a subcommittee that would be created, and maybe the subcommittee is most of the members of this committee, I don't know, but there is time to do that in light of the fact that this whole process. We have to get the ball rolling legislatively, but we do have time to while that's happening in the background, so to speak, we do have time to work on those other issues through the creation of a subcommittee or the continuation of this working group.
Thanks. Kim?
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate, actually, Paul, you just said it, that I think that this really needs sorry, let me put my hand down so I don't forget, a subcommittee to kind of drill down on what data we're collecting to determine values. As a number of you have said, some of these we're not going to be able to use lease values. And so we have to determine that in a different way. Some of these categories have dramatically changed, annual crops being the number one category. I think that's dramatically changed. That combines, a current $3,000 an acre value with a, I think $1,200 an acre value. So that's a dramatic kind of crushing of those 4 categories into one. And I think we need to look at that. Getting to something Damien said about how we determine that, and looking at sales. I think it's very, very important to address that. That is what brought us here, is that much of the values were based on current resale values. That is not what PA 490 is. It should be looking at use. And that's why we have all of these categories. Otherwise, we could just have one category for PA 490. But we're looking at how each one of these different categories is using, and what the products that are coming out of each one of those categories, ultimately determines its value.
Thanks. Bonnie, then Paul.
Great. Thank you, Martin. Again, I just want to really reiterate for you folks that Kim, I'm hearing you say that everything is going to drastically change between tillable A to what we currently do through D. Here's the reality. It doesn't matter for a lot of folks. If the dairy guys are going head to head with tobacco to get land, and anybody that has any open land, it is being gobbled up because land is becoming such a scarce resource, tillable land. So we have got to face the reality that it doesn't have this big effect in terms of, the high value crops are going to go on this land. Whoever has the most money at a given time are the ones getting the land that's open. So what was traditionally River Valley land, that went for tobacco because they were the ones that had all the money, that doesn't exist anymore. So I don't want to get really caught up in having to grab all these data points on income and all these other things that go into what somebody is willing to pay for land. Whatever you have on hand to pay for land, regardless of whether it's flat land or it's a little hilly or if it's a little rocky, that's the value somebody's going to put on that. So what I may value as beautiful land for silage corn, maybe something that's going to be, an ornamental person is going to come in and say, you know what, I'm desperate to have land. I'm going to outbid you on this. So I don't want to get caught up in a lot of that, but I really want to steer away from making any of this about income based. This is not about income based. This is about what land is valued for agricultural purposes, woodlot, and again, our submerged lands, if we're going to, be expanding on that. But I don't think that we need to be gathering all of these income based points. This is not what this program is about. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. And I just want to, reiterate, just for point of order, is please don't start talking about motions, everything in the chat. Chat is not permissible for doing, that type of stuff. It's fine if you want to just, in comments, everything. That's what the open meeting here is for. And it is a public meeting. So we want to limit, if we're trying to pop stuff into chat and everything, just raise your hand and discuss it, please. Thank you. Paul, then Ben.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. So a couple things. We've already identified some flaws, which I'm not surprised, like the submersible land and so forth. One thing that I would like to offer, and maybe this is even offering it as an amendment to this, because in light of the insight from Joe as well as Damon, is to change the wording, because I think this is substantive and does make a difference and addresses some of our concerns. That the capitalization of rental values as the primary basis for setting land assessment rates. So that would cover those categories that we are able to get sufficient data for, but not the sole method. Understanding that as others have observed, acknowledged that there are going to be categories that we're going to have to somehow extrapolate from other data, from historical figures. I'm not sure. I don't have the answer to that. But, understanding that, yes, maybe the primary basis should be the rental values, but understanding that there are some categories that we're going to have to somehow get creative or utilize other resources beyond what I'm aware of to come up with a value for those. So I'd like to offer that as an amendment.
So is that just on the first part? I'm sorry, because I had typed
Yes.
it in submerged land,
Yes.
but want to.
Yep, just in that first sentence there.
Okay.
It would be like you said, delete sole and replace it with the word primary.
Okay, so that's a
Second that.
friendly amendment. John, are you okay with that?
Yes,
Emmanuel, because you had made the second. Okay.
correct.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got that piece there is noting that. Thank you.
And then, Paul, were you also suggesting the submerged land as part of that?
Sure, we
amendment?
might as well clean up a little bit of this, which was been brought up. Eliminate the seabed and make that more appropriately worded as submerged land, I guess.
I don't know if I have that spelt right.
We need a B in there. Submerged. Yep, there you go.
Thank you. My mind's not working this morning.
No.
So is that a secondary friendly amendment, Paul?
Sure. Oh, definitely.
Submerged
Yeah.
land. John, are
Yep.
you okay with that?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Okay.
so the motion on the table is to modify sole to primary and seabed to submerged land.
Correct.
Correct.
Just as well, it's a friendly amendment there.
Friendly
So
amendment.
no vote yet until we vote on the main thing, because that's a friendly amendment. So on that. Okay, we're gonna go to Ben, then Damon.
Just to speak in favor of the motion, specifically on the idea of having a professional design the survey with the broad parameters that we've already talked about in this, obviously they would review, or the commissioner would review these materials and put that forward. But I think at this point, given the kind of the guardrails that Joe is proposing, or recommendations on how to design a survey, that all be taken into account. But I think if we go to committee on this, I support the way that it's stated in this motion. Because I think that would give us the best opportunity, especially emphasizing the testing aspect of it, and given the back and forth with the commissioner, that we would come up with something that would generate values that would be acceptable. And also to note that the guardrail is in there, which requires a little further discussion on any percent increase in values would require by the commissioner. Those are all strong points.
Damon?
Thank you, Martin. I just wanted to clarify a couple of the classifications. In terms of wording and really what we're talking about. Currently, we have the category of woodland on the PA 490 application. The description of that says that it's woodland as part of a farm unit, or woodland in a farm unit, I should say. So I'm trying to see whether or not the way that it's described here a little differently as farmland, woodland, or something like that, just carry that consistently between what was there before. I don't have any objections to forest land per se as classified under 107B being identified separately as woodland. That's what everybody wanted to see categorized. But it's, again, whatever terminology you really want to use within that. Also, I would think that, as was briefly discussed, open space really is not one of the categories that OPM values in any way. They do not issue recommended rates. Those are based on whatever municipality has adopted those ordinances. So it is up for the assessor to make those determinations. The only thing that is restrictive on the open space assessment is that it cannot be any lower than farmland. So whatever values was determined for the farmland will be in one way or another beneficial to the classification of open space as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
Thanks. So we had heard from Mike about kelp not really being appropriate, and so I would love to see the kelp be pulled out of this description as a friendly amendment as well. I think, and I like the dynamic of rental values being the primary. It might be worth having something be the secondary method for some of these, or the secondary is the is $1, a fixed rate, something like that. If we look at swampland, non-productive land, that's how it was for a long time. So I think we need something in there, and I think it would be good to do that either before we vote on this, or maybe we need a second motion later on. But we have a chance to discuss now, and I would be interested to hear what people have for ideas of how we value things like non-productive land, maritime, and submerged land in this before we vote on it. And then on the survey, I'm happy to have this group develop a survey. I'm also happy to have a professional group develop a survey, as was just suggested. Both of those are okay with me. I would say if it's a professional outside group doing it, it'd be really nice to have this group or a interested subcommittee of this group be able to review that survey and provide feedback and edits to it. I'll stop there.
Sure. So just, I just want to just make note of it, because some of the things being discussed, I just want to remind everybody are things that did not get voted out as recommendations here, as we talked about, some of these things about having, that trigger of certain percentages, different things, on it from, some of these got, pulled back out from the recommendations and got voted no, not to move forward with them. And they're coming up again. So I just want to make sure people are aware of that. So just as an awareness, it's up to the group what you want to do. If you want to re-include certain things again that the group did not vote for on here. So just keep that in mind. Michael?
Thanks, Joe. And yeah, so the friendly amendment of removing kelp from there, and another one, if I could, another friendly amendment that could be considered is, Joe brought this up, changing the aquaculture and maritime waterfront to what it is currently used as, which is maritime heritage land. So, keeping it the same as what's already in legislation. So we're not creating a new term that is being considered in a different way.
Don, you've had a couple suggestions. Anything, Paul, anything you want to look at those as friendly amendments? Anything?
Yeah, no, I think that those are both very logical changes to remove the word kelp, as we realize that's not on the land, that's in the water column, and more accurately naming the maritime heritage land the way it's being referred to in other legislation, and so that would make more sense.
Thanks.
I'd certainly be agreeable for that.
And John, are you okay with that?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I'm just trying to keep up with this as we
And Michael, if we're going along with statutory alignment, I was going to say address the open space as a formal motion. I think we've talked about it, but I don't know that anybody's actually suggested it as an amendment.
I'll suggest it as an amendment to, pull the open space out of there, keep it as it was.
Second.
Yeah, again, it doesn't need to be there. It is dealt with separately, very independently of 490. So yeah, it really doesn't need to be there.
Okay, John, you're okay with that?
Yes, I'm okay.
Do we need to vote on that or hold further discussion?
No, these are friendly amendments right now, so this will be part of the main motion with these friendly amendments, which is why I'm just noting them in red here. So we've got keep track of it all. Okay, Kim, thank you for waiting.
Yeah, so in regards to the farm and woodland, and speaking to a farmer recently about how their crop fields lay out, I'm wondering if we can include in this, maybe it does in some way, but hedgerow, buffer land. He said of his 90 acres, 30 of it is this kind of buffer land, right? It's not really determined. It's not really like non-productive like ledge and swamp, and it's not forest. It's hedgerow. It's wind barrier that helps protect his cropland from erosion, wind erosion, that type of thing. So I don't know if it's worth expanding that just to cover that type of land. Currently he pays for, I think he's paying tillable B or C on that currently for all of the land, but there's a percentage of it, a good percentage of it, that is actually not in farming for those reasons.
Joe?
Tim, I think you're almost on the line of agroforestry there. I got excited, but I think that kind of is a discussion of the farmer with the assessor to some degree for them to chunk it out. For farm woodland, there isn't really anything defined as to the shape of it. The forest land, the deep forest land sort of classification that a forester would certify, that has some shape rules and regulations on it, but I don't think that would apply to farm woodland. And so I would imagine that farmer, if they can provide a map to their assessor of, hey, that landowner would do this. These are the fields that are being tilled, and then these are the strips of land that are treed in between them. They may not be timber trees, but they're trees nonetheless in these hedgerows. You could have a forest that hypothetically is 50 feet wide if the assessor agrees to that drawing of it. So I don't know if we need to change that. I think that would fit within the forest land, the forest woodland. Sorry, the farm woodland.
Yeah, I'm just seeing you guys kind of getting a bit granular on some of these other topics. So that's why I wanted to raise that as, so that it is not misunderstood by an assessor at some, date that they say, well, no, that's not forest or woodland. That's just land. And some of it does not have hedgerow. It's maybe it has grasses and things like that. So again, I just wanted to, put that out there as you guys are kind of, drilling down on each one of these topics, that we may want to just get a little bit more granular on that particular one.
Bonnie?
Kim, are you offering a friendly amendment to include hedgerows and buffers in that?
Yes.
There we go.
Just clarity, hedgerows and buffers would be within the farm woodland, the farm woodland category.
Yeah.
So, sure. Sorry, mine just went blank for a minute. Sorry. Paul and John, friendly amendment about adding, guess we'd add it to the end, may include areas used for maple sap production, hedgerows and buffers. Is that what we're looking at?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Other discussion? Joe?
Sorry to be a kicking a dead horse here, but what do we do when the primary doesn't work for these categories? What do we do when we don't have enough rental numbers for unproductive land? Could we define, like, if we're gonna vote on this motion, which would be great, but can we define this as part of it, or are we going to be looking to make a second motion related to those that sort of counters this a bit? I think it'd be worth trying to discuss prior to voting on this, how we're going to value lands which do not have 10 or more or 30 or more reported rental values. Keith, I'll pass it over to you. I see your hands up.
Keith?
I think there needs to be some sort of extrapolation process that'll happen sort of behind the scenes once the survey data stuff comes in and you find those flaws and missing pieces. I think unofficially in the decades in the past, that's my understanding that is sort of what happened, to fill in the blanks and say, tillable, A is worth a lot more than B and C, and the steps were then, defined, and it may have not been a pure mathematical model out of data that picked the exact dollar amount of each one of those categories, but kept it relative. So I would just urge some flexibility and that we need to leave that soft here at the moment.
Joe?
I almost wonder, I worry a little about leaving it soft because that's how we kind of got into this mess, right? Was rental values were used, and now, for things like swampland, for example, which is an easy example to pick on. I would almost argue, and I'd be happy to, throw this out as maybe controversial, but if if nobody is renting these lands, what is the value of them? Right? So if nobody's renting swampland, does it actually have a value for current use, right? It's got value for hunting, it's got value for other things, but for current use, as it relates to farms, it really doesn't have that sort of monetary value. And so maybe those land rentals have to be $1. Or sorry, the valuation of them has to be $1 or $0 because we don't have enough data to show that they actually have value.
I would just quickly argue back there that just because you don't get data doesn't mean it's not there. And that's part of the situation. How do you force people to report stuff if it's not a statutory requirement in order to stay in 490, for example, if we go that far with it? So,
but who's renting swamp?
Okay, let's not back and forth, please. Thank you. Kim?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to make a motion that we
Well,
have.
Okay, hold on. We've got a main motion on the floor, so I can't take another motion yet.
Okay.
But if you can hold that thought. Sorry, just because otherwise we got multiple motions, so we've got a motion on the floor. So an amendment to the motion is fine, but I can't do, another separate motion yet. So hold that thought, because I think I know where you're going. Okay, Keith and then Damon.
Yeah, just quickly a thought on that, relative value here. We may want to, after we handle this motion, deal with sort of a ranking of the both historical as well as the maybe obvious valuation of the categories that we have, so that then as things are weak on data in certain points, that we do know that swampland's not all of a sudden going to turn around and overtake the higher classifications in terms of value because of a crappy data situation like we faced before. But that'll be a follow-up. Thank you.
Damon?
Thank you, Martin. I just was trying to clarify. I see that some of the text as far as descriptions has been red highlighted, and I wanted to see where exactly we were with the various categories. So let me see. Remove maritime heritage. Okay, thank you. I didn't see what the revisions had been. Thank you.
Not a problem. Other discussions as on the motion as friendly amended? Any other discussion? Oh, Joe and then Paul.
Sorry, I mean, Paul, are you amenable to a friendly amendment that that categories which have 30 or less respondents are valued at $1? I don't know how we address this otherwise, because we're going to run into a huge problem with swampland. And I want to remind people that this isn't just about swampland on farms. This is swampland across all of the forest land within PA 490. So we're not just talking about farmers here. We're talking about the other 2/3 of 490, which is forest landowners and people who own these wetlands. So we have a lot more responsibility here with some of these categories.
Yeah, excuse me. If I may respond, I think myself and those who I collaborated with here, we weren't really sure, how that was going to work best. So we didn't want to specify a particular method. but we're, as was mentioned earlier, that would be comparing maybe some historical perspective as well as extrapolation from the values that we do know from the responses, and maybe even taking into consideration some of Damon's comment regarding records of recent sales and how that would establish a value. So it'd probably be a combination of methods. I don't know how we actually word that and put that in the motion.
Bonnie, then Chris.
Thanks, Martin. Can I just have a point of clarification? When all the information is turned into the Department of Agriculture and OPM, historically there was always a committee that was brought together to review that data. Is that still the case?
There's not really a committee that looks at the data. We send it out. It's outsourced, if you will, to the vendors. UConn is who we've used currently, that goes through all of the data and everything, and then they provide us with reports and everything else. We don't have appraisers on hand. We don't have, the people capable of doing it in-house. So, there isn't a committee per se. I mean, it's staff of DOAG, staff of OPM, and then we work with UConn, who's been our vendor for the past couple of years, going through that data.
So, Martin, I guess because I'd been around maybe a little longer than some, there had at one point been a committee that had a representative from the tax assessors, from a couple of the different agricultural organizations, that would sit down with OPM and the Department of Agriculture and say, hey, this looks alarming, or hey, these all look right where they need to be and they've lined up, and it's done. So I guess what I'm wondering is, should there not be the appropriate representative sample number returned on a category if we can go back to having that committee put together by Commissioner and the Secretary to say, we need to identify the best way to get at non-productive land. Part of my concern is that if for whatever reason we're not getting the survey results in the annual request, that could affect some of the other ones, which we should be able to get. We should be able to get things on orchard, pasture, things like that. But thanks for the point of clarification. I'm just trying to figure out who else puts eyes on this, that is from the agricultural and tax assessor communities before those final determinations are made.
No, thanks. Chris?
Thanks, Martin. I just wanted to, just a point of clarification for the record, in case folks are wondering. Land with standing water, that does meet the minimum stocking standards for forest land, is considered PA 490 forest land. And so your classic examples are red maple, cedar swamps. The term swampland can be confusing possibly to some folks. So just for a point of clarification, we are talking about treeless lands with standing water that do not meet the PA 490 forest land minimum stocking criteria. And stocking by means trees per acre.
Thanks, Chris. Other comments on the main motion as friendly amended? Bonnie? Oh, you're muted.
I would like to offer a friendly amendment at the end of the proposed motion that states, should a representative sample of less than 10 responses come in, that a review committee be brought forward to address those low responses.
Paul and John, well, Martin's taking that down. Would you consider that friendly?
Yeah, no, I think that would
that could go a long way to address the concern of how do we set those values. So I would be amenable to that.
John?
Just a quick question clarifying. Bonnie, is that for if a landowner has multiple classifications, is it just for a particular classification or is it the whole survey for that landowner?
No, I think it's the whole, it's not per landowner. So let's say we don't get anything that comes back for you know, the I don't have it in front of me, I'm sorry. The
rental of non-productive land.
Non-productive land, yeah. The committee would review that category, not the individual landowner, but the category as a whole.
Okay. All right, got it. I'm okay with it, Martin. Thank you.
And Bonnie, does what Martin have on the screen, is that mirror what the amendment is?
Yes.
Tried to get it verbatim as you were stating it.
No. I think that's spot on. And again, I'm doing 10 just because Joe, I'm not the official survey expert. If you think it should be 20, it should be 20. I'm very open to changing my friendly amendment.
Joe?
Yeah, if I can jump in. Well, Bonnie, you could get a lot of people debating that number. 10 is kind of a bare minimum. 30 is probably a better number. 20 is kind of in the middle there. So I'd probably, I actually don't know what I would suggest. I would be more interested in setting that number. It would be interesting to see what categories worked in this Yukon survey and what number of responses they had were. But I'm comfortable with 10. I'm not going to fight that. I do think it would be worth maybe having some wording in here about who might be on that committee, or at least who's on that committee. Like I would at least like to see somebody from Deep Forestry on that committee. I would like to see obviously somebody from DOAG, and Martin's, OPM on that. And then I would imagine we would all want to see some farmer representation or forest landowner representation, maritime folks representation on that if there is a committee. I don't have a strong feeling, but I think we should be a little bit descriptive on that. So I'd argue for a number of 20, but I'm comfortable with 10.
I'm going to drop in, just for everybody's reference here, the language from the governor's letter about who this working group had to include, and which is broad, but gets to those categories, Joe. So that's in the chat for everybody's review.
Thanks, Brian. Paul? You're muted, Paul.
There we go. Thank you. So yeah, if the question is raised, yes, I would certainly be fine with raising that to 20 if that's a more realistic response rate to get accurate results. Otherwise, the review process could begin. But before we move any further, I just wanted to, we're on this last page of the motion here, and part of that in that core principle up in the top does include in the motion that triggering mechanism of some certain percentage increase over the previous 5-year value. I know that whole process has received a fair amount of discussion in this working group. The feeling was that by putting it in here, it would hopefully this would come into play after results are submitted back to DOAG from the third party who's going to crunch all the numbers, but before those results get become official. So that would mandate a review. Now, whether we can't just leave it as X as in this motion. I think if we're going to leave this clause in here, which I think is appropriate, that's why we put it there. We need to come up with a number, and I've had a discussion with several people of maybe 8% over a 5-year period, maybe 10%, maybe 6%, but some kind of number that would be realistic Obviously, if there's a 50% increase in 5 years, that's a big problem. So I guess I'll just leave that open to discussion. I originally proposed 8% over 5 years, but certainly open to hearing what the group thinks is an appropriate figure for that, if we want to include that clause in this motion.
Bonnie?
If we could just go back and I will change my friendly amendment to 20 responses to be more accurate. And for helping to put forward catch up to Martin. There we go. And to bring that assessment core principle in as well, to state that the assessment increase cap governed by the commissioner of land value trigger of, let's go with 8%.
Hey, Bonnie, since you're making a friendly amendment, did you want to include representation in the underlying?
Yes. Thank you, Commissioner. And I totally agree with you that reflective of a representative committee shall be reflective of the governor's.
I think Martin, if you pull including representation from ag organizations, farmers, municipal leaders, and assessors.
Yeah.
That's kind of the.
Yes, totally agree with you, Commissioner. Thank you.
And again, Paul and John, is that those three
Yes,
changes?
I'm good with that. I think that's a great, that is necessary. Yes.
I'm okay with it. Thank you.
All right, it's Martin's cleaning up the language there. Joe, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm wondering that cap I'm a little uncomfortable with just because we had a big conversation about it. And I remember Ella had presented some numbers. I don't have those with me, but for example, 8% might happen every single time, this could trigger a review. Because I remember some of these categories jumping like 20, 40, 50% year, cycle after cycle.
Yeah, you're correct, Joe. Their numbers were very high.
Yeah, so we might want to review those numbers that Ella had put together if we're going to keep the cap.
And I think that's why, if I didn't mean to interrupt Joe, I think that's why you guys wound up not voting to move forward with that, was because those numbers were so high. I'm trying to pull them up because I do have them in one of I think they were the last meeting presentation.
Yeah, I've got them here, Martin. I'll
okay.
The chat.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, I don't know how others feel, and if I'm the only one, I'm not going to be a stick in the mud on it. But for me, I'd say pull that out of this, but I would be happy to defer to others on it. The other thing that we have as an option, instead of this committee for 20 responses, so every 5 years we're going to have a swampland committee. We can invite Shrek, right? He'll be our regular, but we could say you defer. The value stays the same as the previous, or the average of the previous 10 years or something like that. And for something like swampland, it would just stay really steady based on previous years, assuming there's no new data coming in.
Yeah, that would require legislative change.
Okay.
So your average numbers looking at for 2025, I'm just going with the average, 77.51%, 2020, 35%, and I'm just rounding up here. 2015, 47%.
Okay. Yeah. So those are some numbers that we should think of.
Now, you had some low numbers like Tillable A was, minus 4%, but Tillable B was minus 8%, but then Tillable C was up 66% in 2020. So they fluctuate all over. So I was just looking at the averages The lowest average was in 2010, which was 16.45%. You know,
I bet some of those are from small sample sizes too,
Mhm.
where you have 2 or 3 people reporting. So that might address, this committee might be able to address that type of thing.
well, those are the averages for all categories in total average.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, that's not for a particular one. That's the total average of all the categories.
I
Sorry.
see. Okay, that's okay. But it's still kind of what goes on. You
Yeah.
know, I wonder, just thinking about non-productive land, swampland was 0, for years and years and years. And then 2015 and 2020, it bumped up to $40, which, you know, all good. But I wonder how that was set. And maybe some of this stuff will come out if the survey is designed in a way to capture zero values, we might actually see people saying that they're renting swampland as part of land that they're leasing. But if the survey is defined well, they may actually be able to report, yes, swampland's part of what I am leasing, but I'm not paying for the swampland. And so we might actually be able to get a bunch of zero values for something like non-productive land if the survey's designed to tease that out. So,
Ben?
Yeah, I'm most comfortable in maintaining a gatekeeper if we have to adjust it. I think that there's a lot that's going to we're going to have to go through a cycle in order to understand it. And I think that at this point, the framework is good. And I think the framework should include this kind of a cap. And so I'd speak in favor of it. And sticking with 8% to start is fine. Just not knowing what we're going to glean it's too difficult at this point. But having the gatekeeper as part of our recommendation, I think, is very important.
Paul?
Kind of reflective of Joe's comment. I think the thinking was here in coming up with a low number was that if this new survey wording and methodology and frequency of data collection and so forth works the way we all hope it does, then we won't have major swings in valuation. So that a lower threshold would be appropriate and hopefully would not trigger very often. But if it did, if some category did hit that, then at least it would, the farming and landowner communities would know that someone's going to at least take a second look at it. So that was why we thought that, a lower value would work. I know historically there's been some crazy swings, but if this new system works the way we all hope it does, we hopefully will not experience those dramatic swings in value. And then my second comment is in your sentence that you added most recently, Martin, instead of reflective committee, it would be review committee, I would think.
Oh, thank you. I was putting the committee would be reflective of these organizations.
Right, I know. The word did come out in discussion, yes.
Thank you. I'm sure as I reviewed it, I'd be like, wait a minute. Thank you. Other discussion on the motion with the amendments? Bill?
Yeah, so just to beat on the cap a little bit, I think 8% is far too low, just considering the data that we just spoke about. So we had in 5-year periods, we had 70, 35, and then going back to 2010, 16% is our lowest in the past 15 years. So 16% on average was our lowest increase. And if you think about the market at that current time, so the previous would have been done in 2005. Think about what happened in 2007, 2008. So, and then you do our next survey in 2010, and we have a 16% increase. Given where the overall real estate market went from 2005 to 2010, that makes sense, right? To only go up 16%, while we saw many commercial and residential values go down substantially during that time. So if our lowest increase is 16% and we're setting a cap at 8% right now, I just think we're being unreasonable, and we're going to be every single time we do this survey, this is going to have to get looked at, and it's going to put a hard stop to it because I just think 8% is far too low.
Thanks, Bill. Other discussion?
Martin, I would suggest that a friendly amendment usually means it'll be adopted by consensus, and I don't think we're going to reach that on 8%. So do we want to strike that and have a standalone motion on what that number could be? I defer to Bonnie and the maker of the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm happy to withdraw my friendly amendment regarding 8%.
And then all the other red text stands,
All the other, yes, sir. Everything else stands.
and then maybe a second, or once this motion has been voted up or down, a motion to discuss the percentage would be the next logical process.
Right. So that would mean this motion would go through without a trigger percentage in there.
Can you just scroll through this a bit, like the first page and the second page?
Sure.
If we're gonna go on a vote
Sure.
on it. Just
So, yeah, thanks, Joe. What I'll do is I'll run through here and go through with what the changes were as friendly amendments. So the motion was to move the PA 490 working group, reaffirm endorsing the capitalization of rental values as the primary basis for setting land assessment rates for land enrolled in the PA 490 program. Let me get out of edit mode, sorry. I'm sorry that the recognized land classes are as the table below, and the first one was annual crops, orchard, pasture hay, farm woodland, non-productive, deep forest land. Sorry, that one's supposed to change to maritime heritage land on that. Submerged land, and then removing open space. Sorry, remove those on the lower ones. And the working group adopted the recommendation that the assessors annually collect survey information as a requirement of continued enrollment in PA 490 assessment, and incorporation of the suggestions be built in by a third party under the supervision of the DOAG commissioner with final approval. And I should go back and I can do this, right? Just to correct these so we're in the same vein there. Apologies. And then going down where they match up, the annual crops, orchard, pastured hay, farm woodland, adding in the hedgerows and buffers, changing it to the maritime heritage lands, which we noted, the submerged, and removing the open space. And then just with the one addition at the bottom, should the sample be less than 20, that a review committee be established. Kim?
Yeah, I would like to make a friendly amendment that the word sole after, at the very top, after primary stays, but the word sole goes away. I think we have to
It
determine
does.
what
It
other.
does. That's what the brackets mean. Sorry.
Oh, okay. My bad.
And I'm track changing it so I can know which is being removed. Sorry. Yeah, the brackets mean it's being removed. Sorry.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. That's just legislative way of doing it. Joe?
could you just go to the next page? I think there's not that one. Keep going. Sorry, maybe it's the last page. Yeah, the last page there, the third point down under core principles, it still has open space listed in there. I don't know if that matters or not to take that out because we sort of pulled open space from it.
Right, we
Yeah,
did.
that would more accurately reflect what we're doing. Thank you, Joe.
Got it. Thanks for that. Kim, did you have something else? Oh, okay. Thanks. Just
Good.
want to make sure.
Are we with the collaborative survey framework, engages third-party experts to design a survey? Could we have something in there about having a review of that survey? It's great. I think it's good to have that. I do think it'd be nice to have some ability for folks who are interested in this group to review that survey before it becomes finalized.
Bonnie?
Joe, do you think that it captures ensure stakeholder trust through final advisory review and support from committee farm groups? Would you rather see that moved
No,
up?
if that's what, yeah, I think that's okay. If that's the intent of that, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I guess I just wasn't as clear on that line, but
Yeah, that's the way I interpret it as well, that
Okay.
there was that advisory review group there.
that sounds good to me.
Other discussion? Okay, seeing no other discussion, we'll call for a vote on the motion as friendly amended, which you have, here on the screen here. Easiest way to do this online is if you use your raised hand feature as we're going to vote, so we can, verify everyone's voting. So those in favor of the motion as friendly amended, signify by raising your hand, and just leave them up, please, so we can make sure, excuse me, we get everyone that's eligible to vote voting.
Martin, this is Mark Welter. I can't find my raised hand, but
It's the bottom of the screen there. It says react, but that's okay. I'll mark it down. Got it, Mark.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah,
Got it.
it's okay.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay, that's okay. I got you, Mark, on there as well. So let me go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10. Okay, so now if you can all lower your hands. Thank you. Those opposed, raise your hand. Michael, I don't know if you're opposed or that was, okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure so we're not double. If you're opposed to raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Lower the hands there. And then anyone abstain? Okay, so it's motion carries 10 yes, 2 no. Okay, so then our next order here is, next steps of like to move forward with. On here, I know there was, discussion. Does anyone want to do a motion regarding the trigger percentage? Kim?
Yeah, I think we make a motion to form a subcommittee to review what are those data points, especially on the areas that we are uncertain that we will meet that 20 collection points on lease rates. So I think there needs to be further discussion on that.
Is there a second?
I'm just curious how.
Okay, hold on. I need to get a second if we're moving forward with this or not. So is there a second?
Can you repeat the motion, please?
Sure. It was to create a subcommittee to review the data points for the survey. Did I get that right, Kim?
Yes.
Okay, hearing no second, we can't move forward with that, so. Bonnie? There
Kim,
you
I
go.
think that the subcommittee, I'm sorry, not the subcommittee. I am satisfied that it would be going to a third party to create the survey. And I think that that's where the creating the survey and having that professional input will provide clarity.
Thanks, Bonnie. Joe?
Yeah, Kim, sorry to leave you hanging on that. I wasn't going to second it. I don't know if we need a subcommittee for it, but I would be interested if people wanted to bring points forward that this third party should be considering in the survey for data points and things to collect. I do think we could provide them some suggestions as things we would like to see considered. I don't know if we need a subcommittee for that. I think we could provide those. I would also make a motion that we raise oh my goodness, the cap to 20% from 8% to 20% via the previous motion. So we're not triggering it every time.
So let me just clarify for you. So, because it's not a cap.
Yeah.
Just to get you the wording right.
Please do.
So I think what you want to do is, the assessment, well, actually it does say that, apologies. The assessment increase cap governed by the DOAG Commissioner through a mandated review of land value trigger of 20% over the previous 5-year value is what you're looking at doing, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
That's
to make that trigger of 20%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Second that.
Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, so Joe, and that was Paul. Thank you. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that the land value trigger be set at 20%. Discussion. Keith?
Yeah, thank you. I agree that the 20% is much more realistic, especially over a 5-year period. 8% doesn't leave much wiggle room. 20% may also end up with pushing more things to review than we would expect either. That's my only question, but I don't have a mathematical modeling to prove that out.
Thanks. Jenny?
While I always love a lower number, I'm talking about the 20. I'm specifically speaking about the 20%. I am just looking at the chart that Brian popped into the chat where the historical data was looked at, right? We would have triggered it in almost every category in October of 2025. So I guess I just want to caution, while I love a trigger, I don't know. I guess I just want to caution everybody to say if we pick 20%, we may inadvertently be triggering it every single time on almost all of the categories. I don't have an answer to how to get around that.
Thanks, Jenny. Ben?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that just because we just don't know how the data is going to come in when we get 100% participation. So let's leave it at a place where, and if they got to review it, it doesn't mean they have to spend 8 months reviewing it. They can look at it and say that's reasonable and move on. So I think that it's better to have a gatekeeper that is sensitive at the outset rather than to wait until we get in a situation where we've established a gatekeeper that it throws things too far out of line. So I would support the 8%.
Sure. Okay. Paul, then Joe?
Well, just commenting that, this is not set in stone in perpetuity. This could always be changed if we do find out that this is happening too frequently and unnecessarily that values have in fact gone up that much. So, we all hope they don't, I guess, but, and I guess go back to my original comment that I think with a better system, with a more accurate representation coming back from a well-designed survey and mandatory responses, that we will not have those major jumps, that we'll have better data to work with. And that itself will avoid these cliffs and mountains.
All right, thanks. Joe?
I think Jenny's point, I'm super uncomfortable with 22. I feel like it's going to get triggered regular, but I think it's something we could go and maybe, I guess I would can I make an amendment to my own motion? I would amend that when it gets triggered, that the 20% threshold is reviewed by the committee that's reviewing the rates. So in this first round, we send a survey out, the new rates are set, things jump 20%, or 5 or 10 years from now, things jump 20%. A committee has to form. That committee would also review the 20% trigger to determine what is most appropriate for the next round.
I'm trying to get how you want the second part of.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to, I guess the simple part is a committee which is reviewing values that increased greater than 20%. Also, that same committee has the opportunity to review the 20% trigger, to review that number and adjust that as appropriate. So a committee gets called. So a committee gets called to review these rates that jumped over 20%. And that committee, in addition to reviewing those rates, also can review whether that 20% trigger is appropriate moving forward. Paul, I don't know how you feel. Yeah, jump in.
Yeah, no, I think that's a logical, I mean, that's a good idea to have some method for doing that. And I think that would be the right group of people to do it. So yeah, I'd be agreeable to that.
So can we get a second? And basically what I kind of have in short was just to add to this amendment after the end line was that, should the trigger be met, a review committee be brought in to, address and review.
Well, just to clarify, it would be the same folks that are reviewing why the trigger was hit in the first place.
Well, it would be the same group that we're looking at if the responses came in at 20 or less.
Yes.
Yeah, but can I get, Joe has made an amendment. Is there a second to that amendment?
Second.
Thanks, Paul. Okay. Jenny?
Sorry,
okay.
Unraise my hand, all kinds of things. I just wanted to say thanks to Paul. I do feel hopeful that the new structure of the survey and the thoughtful nature that's going into it will help minimize the 20% threshold. And I appreciate this amendment that Joe and Paul worked up.
Right. Other discussion on the amendment? So the amendment is that should the trigger be met, the review committee be brought in to address and review, because then it references the actual, review committee that we have noted there in the rest of the original of the other motion. Any other discussion on that? Okay, so just a vote on the amendment, which is just adding in, should the trigger be met, the review committee would be brought in to address and review. Use your raise hand feature. All those in favor of the amendment? Okay, thank you. And let everyone lower their hands for a second. Okay, and those opposed? Okay, so that passes with 12 yes, 0 no. Is there now the main motion as amended, which was the assessment increase cap governed by DOAG commissioner through a mandated review of land value trigger of 20% over the previous 5-year value. And should the trigger be met, the review committee be brought in to address and review. Any other discussion on the main motion as amended? Okay, then we will vote on that main motion as amended. All those, oh, Ben, did you have a question? Oh, okay. He's just quickly voting. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, and those opposed then, once everyone gets their hand down, and those opposed? And the motion carries 10-1. Okay. To wrap up, as we only have about 10 minutes or so left of our meeting for today, I do want to just note that we'd have to look at a couple of things. Next meeting we have scheduled for August 25th, which is scheduled to be virtual. And looking at direction where you want to go. The person who signed up for public comment did not join us today, so we don't have any public comment, and we received no comments via email. So just wanted to alert that. So we do also need to talk about, public presentation as well, but making sure that we're, and also anything else people want to talk about regarding the recommendations and everything else here. So looking at where the committee would like to go next steps for your next meeting, what you would like that to be.
Hey, Martin, as part of that
Yes.
motion, under next steps and deliverables, it was prep for public presentation to be made by several committee members. So I think we need volunteers for that committee members to develop the presentation.
Correct. I mean, that's true. Yes. I'm just asking whether or not the committee's ready to go, to that step, everything else. Joe?
One thing I think would be nice to talk about next meeting. I'm happy to collaborate on a presentation if my voice is helpful in it. I think next meeting it would be great to talk about what Kim had mentioned, what data do we want to collect in this survey? So maybe some recommendations of things we want to collect. We would like this third-party survey professional to develop and incorporate into the survey. And perhaps it would be most productive if folks have thoughts on that they send some suggestions prior to the meeting next week so we can look at them. So I'm not saying these are decisions for how the survey would be designed, but these are data points that we really hope the survey would touch upon.
Kim and then Keith.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I think that it would be great to kind of look at the past year's survey because there's a lot of questions in there and sort of help to determine, or at least, as you said, make recommendations for that. And I'm also happy to help consolidate all of this into a comprehensive presentation to help put it before the public for review.
Thanks, Kim. Keith?
Yep. Likewise, I'm happy to collaborate on putting together a presentation, and if we can do that in such a way that it doesn't require public notice and that sort of thing, doing it on the side like some of our other presentations have been here. I think that's helpful for us all to get to that point to bring it back to the committee. The other point, I'm wondering if in-person meetings are a heck of a lot better on a lot of things we've been talking about here today, and wondering whether that next meeting has the potential to be in person versus virtual as we try and get things wrapped up.
We'll have to look at it. Right now, we've made it virtual only because we didn't have a space available location. So that's why we wound up virtual. So, but we'll have to, check on that, and we can definitely look into that.
Well, I think we're holding that next meeting for the informational hearing, which would have to be conducted virtually.
Right. But at least Brian, what they're saying is it doesn't seem that they're ready to do that for the next meeting yet. So that they want to do this. I think if we can get them, if those, Kim and Keith and whoever else, could work on presentations based upon our recommendations here and get those to me, prior to, so we can get it out to everybody. We could review those at that next meeting, and do it virtually, kind of do the slideshow and kind of review of those things. Could also look at the survey piece as well. And that would be our next meeting. If that's what I'm hearing, at least.
I would say we don't need a big meeting room to get together. So if that size wise here, the number of people we can cram into something smaller in order to be in person.
It's 11:22.
Yeah, take a look at it.
I think that the only room that had video capacity, Keith, was the room that we've been using, room C and D, on the plaza level. That was very clearly identified early on that people wanted both audio and video from the public.
Yeah, I know it's difficult in the first room we were in.
Yeah.
But I'll let you guys are the logistics and the space thing. So
yeah,
thank you.
Okay. And we have about 5 minutes, but Ben and Jenny.
I move to go to informational hearing. I think we're ready for that.
Oh, first, is there a second?
This is Bonnie. I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we go to, our public informational session discussion.
Without raising my hand, I agree.
Joe,
I do want to move
hold on,
things
hold on,
forward.
Go ahead, Keith. Go ahead, Keith.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
Hold on, Joe.
Okay.
No, I gotta go. 1 second.
I'll go then. I would just, so does that mean the next meeting is the public information session?
It's not stated there. It just says the motion was just to move to go to the public information session. It didn't give a specific date, so
Okay.
on it. Keith or Jenny, then Keith, sorry. I'm trying to go in order.
I don't support the motion, and I'll explain why. I feel that, as Martin and Brian have articulated throughout this process, that we are the body who's presenting to the public. They are the facilitators of this group. I would personally love to be able to see the presentation that we're offering the public prior to going to the public. So I will not support this motion. I had previously raised my hand to say, let's schedule the public hearing today. There's the date. I know you can't formally announce it because of time frame requirements, but there's no reason why we can't have the public hearing scheduled for however many days is required for notice into September. But I still support that we need to meet on the 25th.
Okay. Keith, sorry.
No, that's all right. Let's go in order. I feel for what's it was just spoken here that I think the committee needs to review what we're putting forward out in the public sector. And if we don't have a chance to evaluate that properly, it's going to be an awkward situation. So as much as I want to move ahead faster and support the concept of what Ben is, setting a date, but then also having the committee review whatever is put forward and us melding that together is needed.
Any other discussion? Okay, so the motion is to move forward, move to go to public informational session. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, all those opposed?
Damon, you voted for to go forward and to oppose. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay, so yeah, can we get those no's again? Because now I got hands moving around and I can't keep track. Okay, so, oh, there we go. So the motion fails 6-4. Okay. For that, and because literally we need to wrap up and close by 11:30. Apologies. But Kim, did you have one quick thing? Sorry. Yeah, or is that just your hand? Okay. Sorry. So our next meeting on the 25th, we'll go back. Right now it's scheduled virtual. We'll look about whether we can do something in person, but if we can, committee members can work. I know Keith and Kim will help kind of take the lead on doing a presentation, for public that we can review at the next meeting. We'll also look at, the survey, because that was asked for by the committee to look at that as well. So those will be the topics for the next meeting, which is on the 25th at 9 a.m. For that. Commissioner, anything else you have?
No, thank you everybody for your time today. A lot of good conversation and votes today.
Yeah. Joe, did you have anything? Sorry.
Martin, if you have a summary of all the recommendations we've made, that's a little more, that's like concise and up to date, that would be super helpful to see.
It's in today's agenda packet. It's what I called up earlier on.
Yeah, but in like what we covered today, and if that could be put together as.
Oh yeah, well, you'll have this
send it out.
document. Yeah, we'll get sent out with the notes.
Great.
Yeah.
So we could see them all in one spot. That would be nice.
Yeah, well, it'll be this overall one that got voted on today. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep,
Thanks.
definitely. No problem. Okay, well, with that, at 11:28, we will adjourn, and thank you all very much. Appreciate all your input and help today. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.